A confirmation about the audio and video, please. If both are working fine, kindly confirm the same. Audio and video both are working properly for everyone? Good. So, good evening, all of you, and welcome to the doubt clearing session for geography. I hope that today we are assembled here after completion of the subject, after going through the subject at least once. And that is where we shall be taking up the doubts as well. So, when we take up the doubts, we shall try to facilitate the areas where the confusion is, rather than facilitating the doubts that revise the entire process of temperature inversion, revise the entire process of Enzo cycle. We will be trying to take up few of the specific doubts which are present. So that is something that is going to be our attention and our focus going along. So one by one, we shall be taking up the doubts and we shall be moving ahead. I'm doing good. I hope you guys are doing well as well. Okay. So we start, first of all, with the doubt of, just a moment. Okay. So we start with the doubt of Priyanshu. Priyanshu's doubt is something that we'll take first. And Priyanshu, your doubt is about the temperate cyclones, isn't it? So, Priyanshu, is the portion of when we talk about the frontal formation, I hope the portion of front and frontal formation in itself is clear. And then we will move ahead with the portion of the temperate cyclone and what that temperate cyclone is actually about. So, here, let me do one thing. So, first of all, when we talk about temperate cyclone here, guys, now we will be talking about the basic formation. How is it that this temperate cyclone gets formed? How is it that it gets created? So basically, this cyclone is created, or this low pressure is created, when you have the mixing of the warm and the cold air happening. So in any part of the planet, let's suppose, if you consider any part of the planet, let's assume you consider the planet here. Now, just a moment. So now, let's suppose the cold air and the warm air, they are colliding with each other in an area. Now they will end up creating or forming what is referred to as a front. Now, it is not always the case that the front will develop into a temperate cyclone, but sometimes what happens is that this front develops and it further intensifies as the cold air tries to get into the region of the warm air and warm air tries to go into the region of the cold air. So, initially, you have the condition where you have the stationary front. The first stage is that of a stationary front. Okay, cold air on one side, or let's do one thing. Let's use a different color pattern. Cold air on one side, then you have warm air on the other side. Now, here, that is the stationary front stage. After some time, this front will get distorted. So, as the front gets distorted, here you have the distortion of the front happening. That is, in certain areas, it is the cold air which will try to advance. Whereas in the other areas, it is not as if here you don't have cold air. Here also you will have the presence of cold air. Okay. Whereas in certain other areas, you will find that the warm air tries to advance furthermore. Right? Now, after that, you have a simultaneous creation of a cold front as well as a creation of a warm front. So you have the front, this particular portion where the distortion is happening, that distortion gets exaggerated. Simultaneously, you have the creation of a cold and a warm front. So you have the cold front on one side and you have the warm front on the other side. That is, the warm air is advancing. So this is your cold front and this is your warm front. Okay. Now, here, in the case of whether we talk about the cold front or whether we talk about the warm front, in either of the cases, you will come across a scenario where the air is going to rise. In the case of a cold front, you will find that as the cold air advances very rapidly, the warm air is pushed vertically up. Whereas in the case of a warm front, the warm air advances, and as it advances, there also it will rise. So in both these fronts, you will observe the rise of the air mass. Now, when the air mass rises up, okay, so here warm air rises up. Now, that rise of warm air, that will create a substantial low pressure. And this means there would be more winds which would be attracted from all various directions. There would be more winds attracted from the colder areas as well, the warmer areas as well. So the front will continue to get distorted, because as the cold air is going to advance significantly, there the expanse of the cold air will be further expanded. And eventually, from the region of the low pressure here, where the air is rising up, the frontal formation will continue to be in existence for almost around 20 days to 25 days. And till that point of time, the air will keep on rising, forming the clouds and causing rainfall across a very wide area. Eventually what happens, that the front will get dissipated or there will be formation of an occlusion. Why? Because eventually the cold air spreads very rapidly as compared to the warm air. So cold air will start sweeping it up, and then you will have a situation where the cold air completely wraps up the front. So on the base you will only have the cold air, no frontal formation. So with the dissipation of the front, you experience dissipation of the cyclone as well. Is that clear? Priyanshu, is that understood? Okay. Now, let's take other kind of questions. No difference of winds lead to end of France. Yes. What is the reason for getting their advances? The reason is basically very simple and plain, that you have the condition of a rising air. Rising air means low pressure on the ground. Low pressure on the ground means it will attract winds from both sides. Now more winds will be attracted. So imagine more cold winds are getting attracted. They will push further more. They will come with a significant amount of vigor. So that is how the front will advance. Okay. Now, Krishna Priya, shifting of ITCZ. Before that, Lakshya, frontal, temperate, extratropical are all same. Yes, they are all the types of, they are all the names of the temperate cyclone in itself. Okay. Now, so now I come to the question about, yes, Ananya, that is what is happening here. This is a doubt clearing session about the shifting of the ITCZ. So, Krishna Priya, here, when we talk about the ITCZ, I hope we are all very well versed with the portion of the tricellular model of atmospheric circulation by this point of time. So, when we talk about the tricellular model of circulation, what is it that we see is that you have the creation of three cells of atmospheric circulation. Two of these are thermal cells, that is the Hadley cell and the polar cell. Both are thermal cells. In between them, the Ferrel cell, which gets created, that Ferrel cell is basically driven by dynamic pressure. Okay. So here, now this is what we refer to as the ITCZ. Now that is the intertropical convergence zone overall. Now when we talk about the ITCZ, this ITCZ in itself is prone to shift, and this ITCZ in itself changes with the apparent motion of the sun. So when you have the condition, basically when you have the condition that, let's suppose, the sun is shining here, right? Now that means the southern hemisphere is going to be much more heated up. So the ITCZ will shift south and will also end up shifting north when you have the northern summer. So during the northern summer, you will observe that the ITCZ shifts north. Now, if the ITCZ, let's suppose, shifts here, that means what? That means all the air now will start converging here. The Hadley cell will also shift. So that means all the pressure belts, they shift to the north, isn't it? So whenever you have the shifting of the ITCZ, that induces a shift by all the other pressure belts. Okay. Now, so I hope we are aware that we are going to take up the questions which have already been sent to us. So that is the question that we are going to give priority to. So, Priyanshu, your question is taken up, and then I have a question of Harsh Batan. So, basic difference between Walker convention. It is not a convention, my dear friend. Convention is where you use it for treaties and conventions. That is different. And southern oscillation. So when we talk about, Harsh, about the aspect of southern oscillation, it is the prevalence of three conditions of El Enzo, or that is the El Nino, La Nina, and in between them the natural or the neutral condition, which is observed under natural circumstances. So these are the three conditions which prevail. So whenever you have the heating, the cooling of the Pacific or the normal phase of Pacific, that is when the conditions will oscillate from either of these. That is the Enzo cycle or the oscillations. But when we talk about the Walker circulation, so Walker circulation is a normal atmospheric circulation initiated across the region of the equatorial and south equatorial Pacific Ocean across the same latitude. So Walker circulation can be in existence even during the Enzo conditions. So during La Nina, Walker cell is strengthened. During normal conditions, Walker cell is still prevalent. And during the conditions of El Nino, Walker cell is reversed. Okay. Now, that is the aspect of, so I hope, Harsh, it is understood. Now, another question that, Harsh, you had sent was, is the height of the Himalayas increasing? Yes, it is continuously increasing. And as we had discussed already, that is because of the compression which is still being faced. And due to that compression of the continental collision which is happening, so the mass in between, the matter in between, will get compressed and will get pulled up. That is the reason. Okay. And Manas, only trade winds are associated with Walker circulation? Yes. And so the various questions which had been sent, Chepala. So your question is getting confused between El Nino La Nina topic and circum-Pacific belt. Okay. So Chepala or Shivaji. So here, when we talk about the El Nino or La Nina conditions, so La Nina conditions are observed when you have, first of all, in Walker circulation, what happens? In the case of Walker circulation, as the trade winds, they continue to blow. Okay. The trade winds continue to blow. And these trade winds, see, if anybody is asking the difference between El Nino and La Nina, means no revision has happened. no clue is there that what are these things. You have just heard about it, and so I would advise you, if you want to extract some benefit of it, rather than simply placing and throwing topics that tell me about continental drift, tell me about this also, tell me about that also, have a particular question. What is it in continental drift that you are not understanding? What is it in water circulation that you are finding difficulty in? What is it in between El Nino and La Nina conditions that you have some difficulty in understanding? So have that, so that we are able to solve the process. Otherwise, I have the listing of almost all the topics that we have covered in the entirety of the physical geography, that teach that once again. I hope you realize that this is a 3.5 hour session. It won't be possible for us to have the entire portion of physical geography retaught here again. So we cannot obviously have that take my doubts and explain to me, rest others, let them take care of themselves. So have the pinpointed doubt, guys. I will definitely take care of that. Okay, temperate cyclone I have already explained just now. So here, when in the Walker circulation, what do you have is basically the aspect that the winds which are being carried away, that is the trade winds. Now these trade winds, they will carry the surface water, the warm surface water. Now, all that warm surface water, when it is carried away, so here on the western part of the Pacific, you will have the accumulation of the warm surface water. And as this is happening across the region of the eastern Pacific, the subsurface water will be exposed by the process of upwelling, right? So, the subsurface colder water is going to be exposed here. So that means in this region, you will have the presence of high pressure. In this region, you have the presence of low pressure. So that will induce a circulation at the same latitude in between the various parts of the Pacific, where the air will rise up, it will diverge, and you have this circulation. Okay. Basu, you can take the help of the tablet lectures in that case. Now you have the recordings as well. Recordings will also, from there also you can have the revision. Okay. So that will create a kind of a circulation here, which we refer to as the Walker circulation. Now, this is where under normal Walker circulation, the regions of Western Pacific, that is Australian coastline, that is the regions of the eastern part of Asia, they will continue to receive high amount of rainfall, whereas the regions of the South American coastline, etc., they will continue to experience very dry weather conditions. So that is experienced under normal circumstances. Now, as these trade winds continue to blow, they will carry more amount of surface water along with them. So there will be greater accumulation of the warm surface water, isn't it? As these trade winds, they continue to blow over a period of time. Yeah, they will carry more amount of warm surface water. So as the warm surface water becomes significantly much more predominant in the region of the Western Pacific, that means the low pressure would be much more intensified, isn't it? The low pressure becomes much more intense. And here, because the winds are carrying the surface water, means greater amount of upwelling will happen. Greater upwelling means much more area of colder water. Observe here, colder water. So that means much more intense high pressure as well. So you have a much more intense low pressure and a further more intense high pressure as well. So there the winds will start getting stronger. So it is a strengthened Walker circulation, what we refer to as La Nina. So La Nina is what is a strengthened Walker circulation. So the Australian coastline in this region will end up receiving so heavy, even Indonesia, Philippines, they will end up receiving such heavy amount of rainfall. It can cause unseasonal floods as well in many of the cases. Whereas this region on the other side will be very, very dry. Now, this is about La Nina. So, a strengthened form of Walker circulation is La Nina. Now, when we talk about El Nino, in that case, what happens? So, here, all the warm water is being accumulated across the, Western Pacific, all the warm water will be accumulated in the Western Pacific. Now, during certain years, what does happen is that the trade winds they get weaker. So when the trade winds they weaken, so there all that accumulated water which has gained a kind of a height, that starts to flow back immediately. So that starts to flow back here. Okay, it starts to flow back. So all the warm water which was there earlier, that warm water would come in this area. So what happens as a consequence? Now, the warm water has flown back in this area. And why has the warm water flown back? Because the trade winds have weakened. That is why there is nothing to hold the accumulated water in the Western Pacific anymore. So, with the weakening of the trade winds, anything which was, or the force which was holding that accumulation, that force has simply disappeared. So, all that accumulated water has started flowing back. It accumulates itself again in the portion of the Eastern Pacific. Now, here you have the warm water. So, this will create a kind of a low pressure. So that low pressure which gets created will attract winds from all direction. So here there will be a kind of a wind which will be attracted even from this direction. Means surface water will start getting accumulated in this area. And meanwhile, as the surface water is being carried away, in the Western Pacific now, you will have the subsurface water which is being exposed due to upwelling. So here you have the creation of a high pressure. So here you will observe a circulation which is achieved, which is reverse of the normal Walker circulation. And that is what you experience during the conditions of El Nino. So during El Nino, you will observe that the eastern part of Asia, Australian coastline, they are very dry because of the high pressure conditions. Whereas the Peruvian coastline is the one which experiences, and the South American coastline experiences heavy rainfall. So it is the reversal of the Walker circulation. So if you have to decipher it, so basically when you talk about La Nina, it is the strengthened Walker circulation. Walker circulation. And when we talk about El Nino, reversed Walker circulation. Circulation. Okay, right? So that was your question, Shivaji. And why the trade winds got weakened? The trade winds they get weakened because of the fact that the subtropical high pressure belt in itself weakens up because of the heating of the Pacific. Now the subtropical high pressure belt is the driver or the place where the trade winds originate. Just like remember mascarene high is how important for the Indian monsoon. If the mascarene high weakens, lesser rainfall in India. So here the subtropical highs get weakened because of heating of the Pacific. Hence, El Nino is referred to as the warming phase or the heating phase of the Pacific as well. Okay. Now, how Indian Ocean dipole influence? Okay, before that, I will take the questions which have been sent. Then I will take here the questions here, if possible. Then another question by Shivaji: Circum-Pacific Belt. So, Circum-Pacific Belt or the Pacific Ring of Fire is basically that entire belt around the Pacific Ocean, this entire region around the Pacific Ocean, where you experience frequent volcanic activities, earthquakes as well, happening in the region, erupting in a region because of convergence of the plates. So here, either you have oceanic convergence, as you observe in this area around Mariana Trench, where you have the Philippine plate, the Caroline plate, and the Pacific plate subducting underneath it, creating a lot of volcanoes, volcanic islands in the process, creating oceanic trenches as well. On the other hand, you can also have the Pacific plate and the continental plate, that is the North American and the South American plate, they also collide with each other. That also is something which leads to significant amount of earthquakes and volcanic activities. Okay. Charan, for Indian monsoon, which circulation is favorable for rainfall? La Nina. La Nina is much more favorable. And Shanawaz, variability of climate is more in temperate region than in tropical region. Uh, for example, climate. Egypt don't have weather, and Britain don't have. So Britain that you have taken as an example is an absolutely wrong example, because Britain experiences maritime climate. Right. So maritime climate, throughout the year, you will experience the occurrence of rainfall even in the tropical areas. When you talk about any place experiencing maritime climate throughout the year, the same conditions. If you talk about the temperate regions, it is not as if they will experience the sudden departure of temperature conditions, but because of the shifting of the pressure belts. And also, as you go into the temperate areas, there is a larger variability in terms of availability of sunlight. Sunlight is available for a very short duration during the winter months in the temperate areas. So that makes the winters very cold. Whereas during the summer, it is comparatively longer. But in the tropical areas, winter or summer, it is mostly the same. It is the amount of sunshine received is mostly the same. So that is why there is not much of a temperature variation that you experience. Okay. Then in physics, it is said that as we go up, gravitational force increases, but in geography, as we go up, it decreases. My dear friend, please open the book and send me the screenshot where it is written that as you go up, the gravitational pull increases. The force of gravitation, please understand, that is consistent even in geography, even in physics. Force of gravitation is directly proportional to G that we refer to. It is directly proportional to the mass of both the objects, that is m1 and m2. So greater the mass, greater the gravitational pull. And gravitational force is inversely proportional to the distance between them. So larger the distance between them, smaller is the gravitational pull. Okay. So please don't try to think that physics is saying something different. Okay. Then Ashay. No, before that, so Chepala, your question is done. Then Aniket, your question about El Nino, Enzo cycle, La Nina, all have been covered. Harsh Chitranshu, you have a question about, okay, Harsh, I'll take your question first. So, how to revise the completed subject during other subjects class? So, all I'm asking you is devote only 1 hour of your time into the portion that you have already covered, guys. So here it won't take you 3.5 hours to cover the same portion. It will take you around 1 hour to cover one day's class. So give 1 hour of your time, take a look at the recorded lectures, or take a look at the tablet recordings, any of them which is easier for you. Take a look at that. That will complete your revision. So in the next 24 days, you will also be able to finish the two subjects together, then revise both of them accumulatively. Give the time on the weekends, spend more time for revision on the weekends. If you don't carry out revision, then there is no point of simply sitting in the class and thinking about good output. That is not going to be the case. So how to make notes from live class and tab lecture? So that is what I would suggest, is that after your second phase of revision is done, or the first phase of revision is done, after that, when you are carrying out the second phase of revision, let's suppose after you have revised the live class once again, then after that, again, when you have picked it up for revision, maybe after 15 days or 20 days, then after each topic, try to write it in your own words and then match it with the content which is provided. Whether you are lacking anywhere, if yes, where is it that you have to enhance? That's it. Okay. Most of the desert lies in between 15 to 20 degree of North Pole because of subtropical high pressure belt which is present in that area. Then, Chitranshu, you had another set of questions from current affairs. What sources should I prefer from the following? Baiju's Hindu analysis, Baiju's comprehensive news analysis, PDF, webinars, monthly magazine. First of all, newspaper. Read the newspaper. After that, if any portion is not understood or you have any issues, then go for the Hindu news analysis, which will give you an idea. Then attend the webinars. If not, take a look at the recordings, and the monthly magazines should be used for revision purposes very religiously and as frequently as possible. Suggest any book where each and every topic is covered comprehensively. Sadly, my dear friend, there is no such book which is in existence where all the topics are covered significantly. Restrict yourself. If you are reading for general studies, restrict yourself only for the portion of the NCRTs. Okay. Shanavas, it appears for a long time you have not carried out any revision, because the last time I recalled you had a good hold about the concepts. Anyways, Ashay, your set of questions. Why gravitational pull is maximum at the poles than at the equator? The simple formula here, which one of your friends had basically mistaken about gravitation and its importance or its relevance with respect to distance. So, greater the distance, lesser is the gravitational pull. Now, when we talk about the planet Earth, now planet Earth in itself, it is a slightly oblate spheroid in general. When you talk about planet Earth, so planet Earth is what? Its shape is a kind of a geoid. So it is bulged around the equator, slightly flatter around the poles. Obviously, it is not as exaggerated as I'm indicating here, but this is just to show you that the distance from the center overall, if you calculate, that distance from the center is lesser in the case of the poles. This distance is small. So if the distance is less, hence the gravitational pull experience will be higher. Shifting of pressure belts, we have already talked about. Concept of Enzo, Ashe, we have already talked about. Red sanders is a tropical dry deciduous tree which is typically grown in the region of the Sheshchalam forests in the region of Andhra Pradesh. It is put under the endangered category by the IUCN. So it is native of Andhra Pradesh. It takes many years to grow to mature, and that is why its smuggling is something which is curbed down upon. Okay. Now, other than that, Ramya, you had a set of questions. Relationship of El Nino and La Nina with Indian Ocean dipole. So they themselves don't have any relationship with Indian Ocean dipole. Indian Ocean dipole can have a very independent observation of its own. So when we talk about Indian Ocean dipole, for everyone's sake, I will very quickly recap it. So when we talk about the Indian Ocean dipole, so it is a sea surface warming phenomena where the temperature conditions between eastern and the western part of Indian Ocean, that is measured. So when you have the under normal conditions, the eastern part of Indian Ocean will be slightly warmer. So under normal conditions, you will have low pressure developed over here. So that is your normal conditions when they are prevalent. So in these conditions, wind will be attracted from both sides, right? And as they are attracted here, they will cause upwelling in this region. So that will be your high pressure, right? So this is the neutral case. Now this strengthens just like how Walker circulation strengthened into La Nina. So here also sometimes it happens that you have more winds which bring about the surface water. So that warmer surface water pool starts to build up, starts to develop, and you have an entire pool only of the warm water region here. So the low pressure becomes more intense, means more winds will be attracted, means upwelling will also be very sufficient. So it will be an exaggerated form of normal condition. That is the negative phase of IOD. The positive phase of IOD is experienced when you have the heating of the water of the Western Indian Ocean and you have the cooler waters in the Eastern Indian Ocean. It is only this phase of IOD which is productive for the Indian monsoon, Why? Because when you have the low pressure created here during the positive IOD, it becomes a kind of a supporting low pressure which attracts more winds from the region of the mascarene high, redirects them over to the Indian subcontinent towards the ITCZ. That is why positive IOD is conducive for Indian monsoon. Negative and neutral, they are not conducive, they are detrimental for the Indian monsoon. Okay. Now, um, Odisha coastline, why receive rainfall? It is because of the low pressure trough which is created, or low pressure cells which are created due to the shifting of the ITCZ, due to the movement of the ITCZ. So here you have low pressure cells which get created. So these low pressure cells will attract winds, right? What is also referred to as the monsoonal trough. Hence, Odisha will receive rainfall. In earthquake, why compression and expansion of particles? So particles themselves, they don't compress and expand. The wave travels by the movement of the particles. So the waves can travel by various ways. The waves can travel in a sinusoidal path, in a longitudinal manner, in a transverse manner. So light is also a wave, then sound is also a wave, but both of them travel differently, isn't it? So similarly, P wave and S wave, both of them are energy waves, but both of them behave differently. In the case of the P waves, you have the energy which is released and it is transmitted when the particles, they come closer, move away, come closer, move away, and that is just how the sound waves travel. Okay, how polar freezing increases salinity? Polar freezing, what it does, whenever you have freezing activity which happens during that point of time, you have normal water converted into ice. So yes, you have some amount of salt which will also get frozen, but majority of only water will get frozen. Significant amount of salt will be left behind. So that means in the remaining water which is there, in that remaining water, now you have a greater presence of salt as compared to the water in itself. Hence, you will experience the increase in salinity. Okay. Now, Chandrasekhar, uh, the negative phase of IOD and La Nina are very different. Negative phase and neutral phase of IOD, warm water accumulates in the eastern part of Indian Ocean. During La Nina conditions, warm water develops somewhere here. So that distance in itself is more than 1,000 kilometers plus, more than 3,000 kilometers. So this is a huge distance that you're talking about. So please don't get confused that the warm or the La Nina condition and the negative IOD is one and the same. They are very different. Okay. Does the volcanic eruption at Barren Islands lead to the formation of Deccan and the other plateaus? Absolutely no. Then, Ramya, coming to your next question, the fifth question, how high tide affects fishing activity. So that is a temporary phenomena, my dear friend, where when you have the high tides, that is what allows the fishermen to get into the sea, right? Because generally you will observe all the fishermen, they will wait for the high tide to come so that they don't have to drag the boat for a longer distance. So when the high tide is there, water level slightly goes up, the fishes, they also come slightly closer to the surface in order to fetch food, and that is when the fishing is carried out. That is why generally fishing is carried out late at night or early in the morning. Why molten magma has water, carbonate, CO2? What is molten magma consisted of? When you talk about molten magma, what in your image it is constructed of what? What constitutes molten magma? Ramya, let me know. Nife, is it? Oh my god. Okay, how many of us here have a understanding that the volcanic eruption that we have? Okay, I will launch a poll for this. I want to understand who thinks what. Okay. Molten lava consists of materials from one core or molten core asthenosphere and mantle. Let me know what is the answer. Shanawaz, we had taken a map session today morning itself. So kindly go through the recordings. There, the complete approach is being talked about. Okay. So thankfully, here I will later on access the names who have told about outer core. Kindly revise, guys. Please understand these confusions are happening because of absolute lack of revision. So when you have molten magma overall, molten magma consists of the material from the asthenosphere, in many of the portions from the upper mantle itself, which gets liquefied sometimes from the lower mantle. So here in the case of the magma, you have the normal rocks, the igneous sedimentary, sometimes even metamorphic rocks, which are subsumed in the mantle during the process of subduction. They start to melt. So as they start to melt, that is when you will have, or you will come across, the formation or the existence of the carbonates, carbides, or rather the oxygen, the hydrogen, water. Because let's suppose you have Fe2O3 or calcium carbonate. Now calcium carbonate, when it will melt, so the carbonate is not a liquid. I hope we are aware of that. Calcium will melt. But then what about the carbon dioxide portion in that? That will be released as a gas. So that is why the molten magma consists of these gases as well. Then relation of mid-Atlantic ridge to current. So Ramya, when we talk about the mid-Atlantic ridge, it oftentimes works to in the some portions in the northern part where you have the Wyville-Thomson ridge rather. There, the mid-Atlantic ridge is very close, in order not absolutely close to the surface, but close enough to impact the movement of the ocean currents. And that is where, when the ocean currents they encounter this ridge, particularly in the region of the northern Atlantic, they get trifurcated, they get divided due to the obstruction which is posed by the ridge. Solifluction is found in permafrost areas where the lower portion is permanently frozen and the upper portion remains free of ice. Appalachian mountains have been formed as a result of convergence and collision when, prior to the formation of Atlantic Ocean, you had the North American plate colliding with the Eurasian landmass. And Indian plate is heavy. How does it move faster? That is because you have the, as of now, the movement is significantly slowed down because of the compression from the Eurasian side, but it was significantly accelerated when Indian plate was moving in the southern hemisphere around the region of the Reunion Island hotspot. So there you had a lot of molten materials which erupted out, forming the Deccan Plateau. But a lot of molten materials, they lied underneath the plate as well, between the plate and the asthenosphere, providing for a kind of a lubricating movement. That is what accelerated the movement on top of the convection current. So that is the reason initially why the movement was very fast. And temperature inversion is basically when you have the condition of the negative lapse rate which is followed. So when we talk about temperature inversion, so temperature inversion is basically what? Here, let's suppose you have the ground surface See, questions about the ozone hole, etc., we will deal in the portion of environment ecology, guys. So here, the temperature near the ground surface gets colder. Above it, you have the warm air. So you have a condition of negative lapse rate. A negative lapse rate is observed. That is why you have the condition of inversion. Now, why does this happen? So, this happens because of various reasons. Sometimes the ground loses heat very, very quickly during long winter nights. So, when the ground loses heat very quickly, the air above it will also get colder. So, automatically, the air becomes very cold. Now, if your doubt is that if this air will get colder, this air here also should get colder. But that is not how it works, because air is not a conductor of heat. Air is a good insulator of heat. Air does not allow heat to escape easily. So that is why, while the temperature in this area lower to the ground surface cools down, temperature higher up continues to remain almost static. So that is what creates a condition of inversion. You have a subsidence inversion also, where you have the warm air sinking from the top. So as the warm air starts to sink from the top, it undergoes what is referred to as adiabatic compression, and that is what induces the warming. So that is where, when you have the warm air or any kind of air sinking from top, so that is where adiabatic compression will happen, and you will have warm air, whereas closer to the ground, so subsidence inversion is observed where, in the conditions of the middle to higher latitude during the winter months, when the air close to the ground is already very cold. Okay. uh, Asher, right now you were very stringent with the fact that deal with only the questions which have been sent in the Gmail. Now that your questions of Gmail have been dealt, now your other request is please provide some PYQs with poll. So, okay. First of all, let us tackle the questions. Why isotherms do not intersect with each other? Krishna, very simple. Isotherms represent areas of equal temperature. Let's suppose you have a 20 degree C isotherm. Now that means in this place A also it will be 20 degree C. In this place B also it will be 20 degree C. In this place C also it will be 20 degree C. Okay. Here every place will have that 20 degree C. Right here also. Now, if I have an isotherm of 22 degrees Celsius, which crosses this, so what will be the temperature at A here? This A, will it indicate 20 degree or 22 degrees Celsius? It cannot indicate both temperatures at the same time, can it? So that is why isotherms will, even isobars will never cross each other. Okay. Chandrasekhar, in doubt section, I was already asked. I know how ITCZ moves, but I'm only confused in sometimes movement is horizontal in Enzo cycle and sometimes it is longitudinal. So basically, Chandrasekhar, the ITCZ movement that you come across, that movement of ITCZ is always going to be from the region of equator higher up or to the southern part, northern part or southern part. That is the movement of ITCZ, which is always going to happen. Enzo cycles, the circulation that you have observed here, I hope you are not getting confused with this circulation and the tricellular model of circulation. Both are very different. I hope, Chandrasekhar, that is not the confusion which you are facing. So here the circulation that you observe, this is across the same latitude. Whereas the tricellular model of circulation by which you are able to depict the ITCZ, that happens across various different latitudes out there. Hence this variation. Okay, is that understood? So this ITCZ, let's suppose the ITCZ is somewhere here. The ITCZ can shift to the north, can shift to the south. This circulation, however, can shift to the left, can shift to the right. Okay, so imagine if this is the ITCZ, look at the video here. Imagine if this is the ITCZ. This ITCZ can move either to the north or to the south. But when you talk about Walker circulation is somewhat which comes to your direction. So that is where it is longitudinal across the same latitude. So that is the difference. What is it that you have not understood, Chandrasekhar, in this? Okay, let me do one thing. Let me try another method here. So, let's suppose this is the planet. Now, here, the as per the ITCZ or the tricellular model of circulation, the circulation will be initiated like this. Okay, so if this is the ITCZ, this ITCZ in certain seasons, observe carefully, Chandrasekhar, this ITCZ can shift like this, it can come like this as well, okay, depending upon the apparent motion of the sun. So that is your tricellular model. When we talk about a Walker circulation doesn't happen between different between different latitudes. Walker circulation happens across the same latitude and different longitude. So here, when you take a look at the Walker circulation, observe here that when you have regions such as Pacific, which is so very wide, so you cannot have both ends of the Pacific getting heated at the same rate, can you? Both of them will have different temperature. So both of them, when have different temperature, they will have different thermal pressure, low pressure, high pressure. So that is why you have a wind system which is in existence between the same latitude. Walker circle or the ITCZ, that the tricellular model happens between north and south. But here, because the Pacific is so wide, that is why the circulation is initiated between the two ends of the Pacific at the similar latitude. And that is why Walker circulation is different from the ITCZ circulation that you have. Okay. Then Vishnu. In case of opposition Suzuki, ideally the high tide should be lower. No, no. So, Vishnu, you have to understand that when you have the force of gravitation, I hope, Chandrasekhar, now the query is solved. So, Vishnu, understand, when you have the force of gravitation, let's suppose this is the planet Earth, right? This is the moon. Now, this will create a tidal bulge here. Okay. The gravitational pull of the moon will create a kind of a tidal bulge, but that tidal bulge won't be happening only in one direction. There will be a counter bulge developed as well across the plane. Why? In order to gain equilibrium, because both are rotating objects, both will have a conservation of angular momentum, both will try to gain equilibrium. So here, that is why you will have always, even if the moon is here, you will have a counter bulge developed in the opposite direction as well. So let's suppose you have the presence of sun in this region. Let's suppose sun is present here. So the sun will also induce a kind of a solar bulge, right? So that is why both of them gets added up. Hence, as they get added up, the high tide will be a sum product of the lunar impact as well as the solar impact, whereas the low tide will cancel out each other. Okay. Shanawaz, my dear friend, Stacy, that you are asking, is it something relevant for your general studies or is it the portion of optional that you are asking? I'm happy to tell you about it, but then please understand, restrict your questions, respect the session, my dear friend. There is no point asking anything and everything in the sun. So, Shanavaz, is it from the portion of general studies? Because it is not in the syllabus of general studies, is it? But nonetheless, because you have been asking this question, but I would suggest to you, Shanavaz, first of all, revise your concepts of general studies. They are particularly weak. Let me be very honest with you. Let me be very frank with you. The last time we interacted, you had a better hold of the concepts. This time, many of the questions that I'm seeing, the concepts are particularly requiring revision. That will be me going as blunt and as brutal as possible. but I want you to study hard for that. That is why. So here, if you are asking about isostasy, so isostasy basically is that theory of equilibrium again, where you always will have any kind of landform which is created. Eventually, in order to gain an equilibrium, it will be developing into a flattish surface. So what the isostasy aspect tells us, that anywhere where you have a fold or an elevation which is happening, there will be a subsequent depression or denudation which will happen in order to gain that balance, the balance of weight, right? Because the planet overall will never have the accretion of mass in a region without any kind of the depression getting created. That is why for every Himalayan mountain there is a four deep in the northern plains which gets created. Okay, is that understood, Shanavas? I'm failed to get an imagination of ITCZ movement of why. So why are you entangling it with the Walker circulation? Leave Walker circulation alone. Let it be a different phenomena altogether. Only concentrate about the ITCZ. Think about the ITCZ. Think about the subtropical high pressure belt. What is the need of merging Walker circulation and ITCZ? Both of them are different phenomena altogether. Why are you trying to merge both of them? That is why the confusion is happening. Think about the ITCZ, the subtropical high pressure belt. They are different, so they will shift. That brings about the monsoon. Walker cell is very independent of the ITCZ. Walker cell is created because of the heating and cooling of the Pacific. So something happening in the region of the Pacific Ocean is creating the Walker cell. But ITCZ is present throughout the planet. So think about ITCZ, understand ITCZ first, later on try to understand what is Walker cell. Okay. Anubhav, the equatorial cyclone that is being talked about, it is not exactly created at equator. It is created around 5 degree to 11 degree north of equator. So that is why these cyclones are weaker, because the Coriolis force is comparatively weaker. Okay. Yes, that is very apparent. Sure, that is very apparent. And okay, then let's have other questions as well. Storm surges. Prem, storm surges basically are the high level of water in terms of the tides, the sea water which comes in. So when they gain a substantial amount of height, owing to the drag of the wind. So during the storm, the wind motion is very strong. The wind velocity is very, very strong. And that will drag up water along with it. So that brings an abnormally high wave action, which brings coastal flooding. That is what is a storm surge. Adiabatic process, Gayatri, is basically when you have the expansion and the contraction of the air inducing heating and cooling. That is adiabatic process. So think about it. When you have an air mass, if you suddenly compress it, so all the molecules that you have compressed, they will undergo greater amount of collisions amongst themselves, isn't it? So when they undergo greater collisions, there will be heat produced. That is why when air is compressed, it produces heat. On the other hand, if let's suppose I allow the air parcel to expand, so there will be lesser collisions amongst the molecules. Now they will be all in their own piece. So lesser collisions means lesser energy will be spent, means the heat energy will be less, it will be cooler. Okay. Latent heat of condensation, Manas, in the tropical cyclone. That latent heat of condensation adds on to the heat in the eye of the cyclone. That is why the region of the eye of the cyclone, as well as the low pressure, that keeps on getting intensified with the continued latent heat of condensation, which is provided every time that there is condensation happening. There will be latent heat which will be produced. Eye will keep on getting hotter and hotter. Okay. Yes, Laksh, we can have that conclusion. Difference between sinking colder air and sinking warmer air due to compression, due to adiabatic compression, are they simultaneous? In the sense that, Kumari, if you are talking about that, if the colder air is sinking, now that colder air or whatever the temperature might be, as it is sinking, as it is coming closer to the surface, it will experience a bit of compression here. So that is why when it experiences a bit of compression, so that is the where the temperature will rise ever so slightly. Adiabatic compression is not necessarily going to take the temperature to 40-45 degrees Celsius. It will heat it up. It will heat it up in comparison to the previous observed or recorded temperature out there. Okay. Climate types according to Koppen is important for exam? No. So you don't need to learn the codes out there. What you can do is you can take a look at the various different types of climatic conditions experienced in equatorial climate, in monsoonal climate, in Mediterranean climate, in British type of climate, in China type of climate. Just take a look at those basics. Okay, and don't mind for the codes have not been asked by UPSC for a long time now. Then Prem, why latent heat of condensation in the tropical cyclone is accumulated in the eye of the cyclone? Why I'm smiling is I'm not smiling at the question itself. I'm smiling at the pattern of the questions that I'm seeing. Many of us, we are typing any kind of question that we can see, any kind of question which is asked. Let us have one of our questions because that there is a doubt which prevails. So again, I would humbly urge all of you on your own carry out the revision once honestly from the first point to the last point. Don't pick and choose that today I will do cyclones, tomorrow I will do the heating and cooling, day after tomorrow I will do the temperature inversion. Follow the chronology. So do it once, very honestly, do it once. Be honest to yourself. This is an examination for you. I don't care if you score zero as of now, right? So if even if let's suppose you score zero in all the periodic tests, I don't care at all. But please understand, in the exam hall, it will be the paper and you. So there, please don't let. Also, I am seeing few of the candidates who were very in a way supposed to be one of the most serious candidates out there. Now they have not revised for almost 6 to 8 months, and the condition I am seeing in the level of questions that they are asking, I cannot tell you the or I cannot express my level of disappointment. That is something I cannot simply express. So please understand the advantage that you have right now will be there only for almost already a week has passed, at max 3 to 4 days or 5 days. After that you will automatically start forgetting things. So if you want to capitalize on the developments that you have done, on the investment that you have done, on the energy that you have spent, kindly and humbly I urge you, please carry out the process of revision. Okay, so Prem, I will tackle your question. That is, why is it that latent heat of condensation in tropical cyclone is accumulated in center? That is because the warm air rises in a kind of a circular column around the center. So as the air rises up, the cooling will happen across this spiral portion. All across this spiral portion, the cooling will happen, and that is where the condensation will happen across both sides. So as the condensation happens, the heat is released into the central portion. Okay. Then jet stream. Okay, Palak, I will come to it later on. Then, in the meanwhile, Chandrasekhar, in tectonic plate movement, the convection current cause to move plate, convergent to cause mountain, and divergent to cause gap between them. In this, the continuous movement of the plate, I think, inside the earth becomes empty. Why will it become empty? Think about it. When you have the plate movement or the convection current which is initiated, so again, it is always driven by a purpose of equilibrium or sense of equilibrium. So imagine if there's a convection current here, let's suppose. So here the plates are being driven away. Imagine there is a convection current here as well. So here also the plates are being driven away, isn't it? So here, as the plates are getting driven away, meanwhile, you will have the molten portion which is emerging up and forming new crust. So why will there be a gap? Now, if you have a doubt that molten portions have come up, what about the region where the molten portions have come up from? So there you have a consistent supply. So this convection current will also have an arm like this, isn't it? It will also have an arm like this. So that is where you will have the convergence in this area. Some portion will subduct, recharging the mantle. That is why it is a continuous process. Okay. Lakshya, since both amok and thermohaline circulation are looking almost same, universal phenomena. Okay, Lakshya, see, I got your question. I don't know why it was not apparent. But anyways, I saw your question earlier, Harsh. So, Laksh, so basically, what happens is that I hope you have understood the basic of thermohaline circulation. The AMOC and the global conveyor belt that you come across, it is nothing but an enlarged thermohaline circulation. Think about it in the analogy, if you can allow me to provide. Let's suppose you talk about the wind pattern and the wind movement. Now, the wind pattern and the wind movement overall. So, once you understand the basic wind movement, that it blows from a high to a low pressure, the same that you apply, you get the westerlies, you get the trade winds, etc., on a larger scale. They are also winds. Similarly, the thermohaline circulation is a circulation induced due to the difference in density. That is the difference in thermal conditions and salinity conditions. That is why the circulation is initiated. Now, after a point of time, you will come across the fact that this circulation is initiated across the oceans of the globe, and that becomes a part of the global conveyor belt. The portion of the global conveyor belt, all of them driven by thermohaline, the portion of the global conveyor belt lying in the Atlantic, that is AMOC. Okay. Okay. Vivek, yes, my dear friend. So the concept, okay, it is as if you have put in some of the subjective questions from somewhere directly. I'll take those questions, but let me solve Laksha's question first. So, sir, thermohaline is for air and AMOC is for ocean. No, my dear friend, how is it that thermohaline? So, okay, probably the analogy that I provided ended up confusing you more. Thermohaline circulation is something which happens in the oceans. Where what is thermo and haline? Thermo stands for temperature conditions, haline stands for salinity conditions. Can you have an air circulation because of salinity as a factor? Absolutely not. So thermohaline circulation is initiated when you have the less dense water at the lower latitude. They gain a particular height momentum. So the less dense water in the lower latitude, they gain a particular height. Because of excessive heat, they get heated up, they expand ever so slightly. So they gain a height advantage of around 8 to 10 centimeter. Meanwhile, in the higher latitude, the water level is slightly comparatively lower because of increased cooling, and colder conditions bring about a compression of the state of matter. So here you will observe that because of that height difference, water induces a motion from the lower latitude to the higher latitude. As the water reaches the higher latitude, that water also will get heated up, or that water will also rather get cooled down. Not only get cooled down, its salinity will increase because here you will have freezing activity which will be observed. So as the salinity increases, it will become heavier, denser, and then it will sink. It will sink, it will replace the water which had risen up expanded and moved. That is the thermohaline circulation. So that thermohaline circulation is observed across all the oceans by a process that we refer to as the global conveyor belt. Now, that global conveyor belt's portion which lies in the Atlantic, that is referred to as AMOC. Is that understood, Laksh? Kindly look at the PPT itself. There we have explained it. We have written the definition of it as well. So, Harsh, your questions have been taken, I suppose, because I had questions from two Harsh. So, Harsh Chitranshu question I have also taken, and Harsh Batan question I have also taken. Good. So now I come to the question of Vivek. Vivek, Vivek, are you simply copy pasting the subjective questions which are out there? From which question paper are you copy pasting the subjective questions? Because I see that you have not even taken the description of copying properly. Because you have, in a hurry, my dear friend, you have pasted the portion of environment ecology questions as well. Biodiversity hotspots and their conservation. Where have we studied in geography? Right. Where have we studied that in geography? So, if you have a question such as the examine, so this cannot be your own question. This is something that you have copied from somewhere. Nonetheless, I will explain to you what is required to be written there. Explain the concept of plate tectonics and its role in shaping the Earth's surface. Okay. So I think I know the source of this question as well, but nonetheless, so the concept of plate tectonics here, do you want me to revise the entirety of plate tectonics, Vivek, or do you want me to simply dictate to you what needs to be written in the answer? What is it that you have not understood in the question? Please let me know. What is it that you have not understood in this question? Explain the properties of concept of plate tectonics and its role in shaping the Earth's surface. I told you guys, please pick up a specific question. I will be able to answer that. I won't be explaining the entire phenomena of plate tectonics over again. Climatic classification is important with respect to Indian geography? No, not much. Um, Madhuri, what is the difference related between heterosphere and homosphere? So, homosphere is where the air represents homogeneous property, where it is mixed properly, and different sections that you go to, in different areas that you go to, you will get roughly the same proportion of gases. You will roughly get the same proportion of, let's suppose, the various other nitrogen, oxygen, etc. That is something which extends up till the region of mesosphere or mesopause. So till the region of mesopause, you have the homosphere. After that, oxygen, nitrogen, because the gravitational force also reduces, the density is less. So they spread out in a manner where you don't have a particular concentration or a uniform distribution as such. So that is why somewhere you will find a lot of oxygen, somewhere you will find a lot of nitrogen. That is what is referred to as heterosphere. Vivek, I will ask the mentorship line. The mentorship line will get in touch with you. But here I'm not going to go for the detailed answer writing of all the subjective questions. Again, I would ask you, again, I would urge you, if you have a specific question in any of these, ask the specific question. I will tell that 50 times. But I don't take this kind of questions. Compare and contrast the characteristic of tropical cyclones and extratropical cyclones. And you are out here to convince that this is the doubt that you are facing. Okay. What is the condition of organic farming? It is being promoted in certain states. Certain states have created that kind of policy where they have created or encouraged organic farming, particularly the hill states out there. But it is not something which is being implemented across in a uniform manner. Can we use telescope for space observation? Absolutely, yes. You have the James Webb telescope. The Hubble telescope, which was earlier. Difference between cliff and escarpment. So cliff is where it is created mostly due to erosion activities, largely due to erosion and weathering. Escarpment is created due to formation of a fault line, where you have a normal fault and a part of that fault simply subducts. Okay. And okay, I'll do one thing. I will take your questions, Vivek. Try to understand it very briefly. Explain the concept of plate tectonics and its role in shaping the Earth's surface. So, here in this answer, what you have to write is you have to talk about what this plate tectonic theory is. You have to talk about the theory given by Morgan, Wilson, Parker, and you have to talk about in the basic PPT itself. It is given that you have the division of the entire lithosphere into various plates, and these plates, they move over the region of the asthenosphere, and that induces and that movement is induced because of the convective current which is present inside, and that brings into existence various landforms. Now the second part of the question that is present, its role in shaping up the Earth's surface. So there you will find that the Earth's surface, here it is being talked about. Here you have to elaborate upon all the various different types of landforms created due to convergence of plates, the divergence. So wherever you have the oceanic trenches which are created, why they are created, how they are created, fold mountains which are created, that is also a variation on Earth's surface. Island arcs and volcanic arcs getting created, oceanic convergence. Divergence creates mid-oceanic ridges. So all these factors you have to explain, and you have to talk about whether it is convergence or divergence as per the plate tectonics. Then discuss the factors influencing the climate of the Indian subcontinent. And so this is the question directly you have picked up from our subjective test. So factors influencing the climate of the Indian subcontinent is basically, you have the factor of the location of India, you have the factor of altitude, you have the factor of being surrounded by the land surrounded by water from all the three different sides, the relief features that we have. All these influence the climatic conditions. The Himalayan mountains that we have, all of them, they end up influencing the climatic conditions. And monsoon phenomena, you understand what is the monsoon phenomena. Anything which is not understood about the monsoon, please let me know, I will try to explain that. Compare and contrast the characteristic of temperate and tropical cyclone, that is provided in list in the, I will also tell you the module number in the module number 9. In the second last slide, you will get that entire table. Simply copy that table wherever it is being asked. Okay. Now, uh, Copen classification, Palak, not remembering it from prelims point of view. So if you are trying to learn it up, if you are trying to learn up the portion of Copen classification, my dear friend, you will never be able to conquer that. You will never be able to learn up the codes there. You will never be able to capture that. Copen classification will be understood only after you have had a very clear concept of the shifting of the pressure belts. Please understand, there are only 2 to 3 concepts involved there. Shifting of the pressure belts. Due to shifting, sometimes the winds become onshore, sometimes the winds will become offshore in certain parts of the world. Wherever the winds will become onshore, they will cause rainfall. Wherever the winds will become offshore, dry conditions. Wherever the subtropical high pressure belt will lie, it will create a condition of dry condition or desertified condition. Wherever the low pressure conditions will lie, it will create a convection, it will create rainfall. Okay. Laksh, however, we had to mention some factors in both Indian monsoon and climate of India. So the factors influencing Indian monsoon, my dear friend, are very different. Factors influencing the Indian monsoon, there are the 7 factors that we had listed. That is heating of land, shifting of the ITCZ, the subtropical westerly jet stream, heating of the Tibetan highlands, the Mascarene high, the El Nino Enzo cycles, and the IOD phenomena. These are the factors which influence the Indian monsoon. Indian climate, on the other hand, is influenced by different factors. Okay. So, yes, Yuvraj, your doubts. So, I had your doubts. So, your doubt is about the cause and effect of MJO, ocean current movement in the Indian Ocean during northeast monsoon. How does inversion affect the climate of Peru? Okay, so let me take these questions one by one. First of all, the cause and effect of MJO. So, here, when we talk about MJO as a phenomena, please understand that this is a traveling pressure belt system. So, here, Pooja, this will answer your question as well. So, this is a traveling pressure belt system. So here it is initially formed in the region of western portion of Africa. That is where initially it is created. Now, when it is created, it is because of the heating of the western portion of Africa. So when that heating happens, here you will have somewhere development of a low pressure. It will have its twin arms. It will have its arms like this. So wherever you will have the condition of a low pressure, think about it. Suppose here you have the low pressure. So that will attract winds from all directions. The winds will start rising up. It will diverge, right? It will diverge. It will eventually sink in an area as well. So that is something that you will observe. Here it will hit the ground and it will diverge here as well. So that is your MJO. So here it is because of the heating of the portion of Western Africa, that is where first genesis. So MJO has got 8 different stages of development. The first stage of development happens because of this. Now, once you have the creation of a high pressure in this region, means this area is sunny and dry, whereas this area will be stormy and wet. So sunny and dry means what? It will receive no rainfall, significant amount of heating. So here the temperature will go significantly higher up. Temperature will go very high, isn't it? Here it will get meanwhile cooler. So this portion will then get converted into a low pressure and the entire system travels westward. And the effect of MJO, wherever you have the enhanced phase, it will cause heavy rainfall. Ocean current movement in the Indian Ocean during the northeast monsoon. So during the northeast monsoon, you have a counter equatorial or a counter clockwise movement, which is initiated, aided by the trade winds. So you have a kind of a opposite to the southwest. So if you think about it, let's suppose if I can bring back the portion of the Indian Ocean. So during the phase of the northwest monsoon or northeast monsoon, you will have the wind direction shaping the oceanic water movement somewhat like this, right? So that is the kind of movement that you will observe. And how does inversion affect the climate of Peru? Not significantly Peruvian coastline, but inversion is significantly important because there you have the cold Peruvian or the Humboldt current. So that inversion creates naturally dry conditions in Peruvian coastline. But particularly slightly to the south of it, that is in the region of Atacama Desert, that is where the impact of inversion is very apparent and it creates very dry conditions because once you have the inversion which happens or once you have the cold water nearby, so cold water means colder air above it, means you have nearby region which gets colder as well. So that is why you will have dry conditions. Okay. Yes, Rana, I will take a look into that. Pooja, when will MGO support the monsoon? So, Pooja, if you have the low pressure lying in this area, somewhere in this area, it will be a supportive low pressure to the ITC set. But if let's suppose the low pressure has shifted here, then it won't support the monsoon. Okay, but it can lead to formation of tropical cyclones in Bay of Bengal. Somil, even after completing and revising geography, I sometimes find difficulty in solving the PYQs, especially when framing answers. Somil, that is surprising for me because You have a background of geography as well, my dear friend. So you shouldn't be facing these issues. See, many of us, when we are facing problems while framing answers, the reason is very simple. And the reason is that we think about, or we overthink what to put where, what to write in such a way that this answer will create such a lasting impression in the memory of the evaluator, that evaluator maybe before dying will write in his will that that person had written one of the answers, it was the best answer out there. So we are trying, oftentimes we are trying to get an overkill, that write an answer which is so very good nobody can point a finger there. So always try to understand that the answer that you write needs to depict your point of view. So the best way of practicing the writing, first of all, before answer writing, you need to practice writing. So the best way to practice writing is, think about it, that let's suppose you want to explain to your younger brother or your younger sister that what is this particular phenomena. How will you convey that feeling? Will you convey that with the usage of heavy phrases and heavy words and sentences? No. You will use simple language. You will try to make them understand. So, with that point of view, try writing it sometimes. And that is what will create that writing ability, that writing skill will develop after that. And then answer writing is a follow on process. Okay. What are the factors that contribute to urbanization in India, and how can we analyze the challenges associated with rapid urban growth? So, the challenges associated with rapid urban growth, you have the large scale development of slums, because a lack of affordable housings. So, large scale development of slum means what? You will also come across a situation where you will not have proper sanitation and hygienic facilities. So in these conditions of poor sanitation and hygiene, you will find a lot of people suffering from that, and poor health conditions, poor health standards also. Then due to increased scale of urbanization, you have more number of people for the same job, so people will get paid less due to oversupply of labor. Then you have environmental problems, all the types of pollution: air, water, land, noise, light, all various kinds of pollution. Urban flooding is very predominant, urban heat island gets created. So that is the impact. Now then after that, the factors which contribute to urbanization in India, that is largely because of the creation of the economic opportunities in the urban sector, and because our growth process is largely driven by the services which are centered around the big metropoles. That is one of the reasons. Also, in the rural areas, you have a sort of an overemployment of sorts because of excessive indulgement in the farmlands. And that is why you have people, due to reduced income, shifting to urban areas for better opportunities in general. You can also talk about the socio cultural factors, where the urban areas are much more open in terms of the thought process, in terms of the social and cultural acceptance. That is also another reason that you can talk about. How trade winds get exaggerated to cause La Nina. So that is because of the fact that when you have, let's suppose, when you consider, let's suppose, you consider this phase. Now, here you have the warm water under the normal conditions. So the winds will blow. The winds will carry on more amount of surface water. More surface water keeps on getting accumulated. The size will keep on increasing. It increases quite substantially. So that means the low pressure will get more intense, isn't it? If the size keeps on increasing, means the low pressure keeps getting in more intense. Now the that means you will have more winds being attracted, because stronger the low pressure, stronger will be the wind. So hence the winds get much more stronger. In the process, greater upwelling also happens, means the high pressure also strengthens, means there's a significant pressure gradient which is created. Hence that induces a very strong wind movement. Okay. Why sea level is rising? Sea level is rising because of the conditions of thermal expansion of water due to heating, and secondly, melting of ice and glaciers in major part. And Impact of global warming on western disturbances. Basically, when you talk about global warming, that will so that is something that we are experiencing even this year. So global warming will bring about a climate change, which does not necessarily mean every area will be hotter, which means the climate will be much more unpredictable. So for example, the colder regions will continue to have much more cold air being persistent for a very long period of time, and then getting heated extraordinarily. So, for example, Siberia gets very cold, gets very hot at the same in the same year. So, due to climate change, what we have experienced this time is that the Western disturbance, which used to exist only up till March or sometimes in April, that has been in existence as late as July as well. And that is because you have the front which is created. ITCZ has started behaving as a kind of a front in certain cases. But nonetheless, as the warm air of the tropics, they are moving towards the ITCZ. They are confronted with still cold air coming from the region of Central Asia and from the region of Europe. That creates a frontal depression, and that induces west. So Western disturbances, they have become much more frequent. They have become much more long lasting as well. Okay. Why the Himalayas, Sarita, take a bend in the northeastern region? Because that is how the shape of the Indian subcontinent was, and that is how the collision happened. So, if you have to think about the shape of the Indian subcontinent overall, so basically, here, if suppose this was the Eurasian plate, you had the minor Burmese plate attached already. So, this was already the shape. And then you had the Indian subcontinent, which was somewhat having a shape of this. So when the collision initially happened here, so that collision in a way stopped the movement, and that means the rest of the plate simply pushed across the eastern side. So that is why across all these areas you have the mountain formation. In case salinity of soil continues, supply of water to the land, the white color of soil forms upper layer. It means it has high salinity. Does it generate in same place? Then what does it goes nutrient of that soil? Nutrient of that soil is drained away, in the sense that if I'm able to understand the question properly, you are asking that when you have excessive amount of irrigation or over amount of water application which is done, all the salt accumulates on the surface, it solidifies. Then what happens? So basically then the soil becomes very hard from top, because all those salts have solidified. So air and water cannot penetrate through or percolate through. So that is why it becomes significantly harder, and over a period of time its nutrient value goes down. Okay. Why Ganges take a typical bend towards the south? That is demarcated by the Malda gap which is created, and so that is why it will flow to the east as long as you have the contours of the plateaus, the peninsular plateau following them, immediately where the Rajmahal hills end and where the Rajmahal Garo gap begins. That is where Ganga will take a southern bend, driven very much by the physiographic realities of the place. Okay. In lower pressure the temperature is heated, but on higher pressure the temperature, so it is not directly proportional. It is not always the case. You can also have the dynamic pressure zones, right? Dynamic pressure zone where despite the high temperature you have the low pressure, despite the low temperature also you have low pressure, and despite the high temperature you have high pressure also. So you have both the conditions which are prevalent. You cannot have a uniform thumb rule. Generally colder areas will indicate a higher pressure, generally warmer areas will indicate a low pressure, but that is not always the case. This is always flouted whenever you have the dynamic pressure zone. Priyanshu, I've already replied why sea level is rising, because of the two factors: thermal expansion of water and the melting of ice and glacier. Do jet streams hinder horizontal movement of the winds? Yes, they don't allow the mixing of the winds. Shadow zone, how to occur? So shadow zones, they occur in areas where the P and S waves, they are unable to travel. So they occur across the various different portions. So for example, can MJO and western disturbance impact Indian monsoon? Not western disturbance significantly. MJO can. This year, however, western disturbance in the month of July, when it happened, it did impact our monsoonal advancement to some extent. Yes, it did, but not substantially. So shadow zone concept here. So if you have an earthquake which has occurred, let's suppose here, the waves, the energy waves will travel in all directions. But these energy waves, as they are moving through materials of different medium, these won't be moving in a straight path. They will be bending ever so slightly. So as they are bending ever so slightly, they will not be able to be observed in certain areas. In the case of S waves, so as soon as the S waves, they will encounter the liquid outer core, they won't be able to travel through the liquid outer core. So in the entirety of this vicinity area, S waves won't be observed. So this will be your shadow zone for the S wave. S wave shadow zone. Okay, but P waves will be able to travel through this. But nonetheless, because of the bending which has happened, P waves here, they will get accelerated, but in this portion P waves will also not be experienced. So that will be your P wave shadow zone across both sides. Okay, which tributaries are most important for the examination? So basically, you should always take a look at the major rivers, that is Indus, Brahmaputra, Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri, right? And Ganga is generally not asked because a lot of people are aware about a lot of tributaries of river Ganga. So Ganga is generally not asked. But do one thing, take a look at the major tributaries of Ganga as well. That will also put you in the safer side. Vivek, I have already answered the question. So are you simply copy pasting the question, or are you listening to the explanation as well? I have given a detailed explanation of the problems associated with rapid urban growth and also the factor of urbanization in India. So are you listening to the answers, or simply control C, control V is happening? Difference between superimposed and antecedent streams. So antecedent streams are basically those streams which have been in existence over an area before that landmass or landform has been evolved, before that landform has been created. That is your antecedent stream. So for example, let's suppose in a particular region, if the river is flowing, so here, if a river is flowing through here, and if the region experiences bending thereafter, so that is where the river will be able to cut through the folds as it happens across the river bed, and its channel won't be impacted. That is the antecedent river. Superimposed river is where the river flow appears to be almost independent to the parent rock, the bedrock. So that is the superimposed, generally found in very old landforms such as Chota Nagpur Plateau. Okay. Bomb cyclone occurs when you have a sudden intensification of that low pressure. Low pressure within 24 hours drops by more than 24 millibar, means the winds will substantially get very strong. So that is the bomb cyclone. Now, why will the pressure develop? Maybe because of excessive heating, maybe because of the thermal factor or sudden increased amount of convectional rise of the wind. Any of these factors can initiate a bomb cyclone. And convergence and Madhuri, could you please elaborate about divergence and convergence? As I know that divergence equal to high pressure and convergence equal to low pressure. That is more or less correct, Madhuri. So you are correct there. So basically, understand, whenever in any particular part you have the wind which converges, So that wind will rise up, it will rise up here. So on the ground surface, it will create a condition of low pressure. So convergence here will create a low pressure. Okay. Now, as the wind here, then let's suppose sinks in this region. So there will be divergence on the ground. So that will always induce a kind of a high pressure. Okay. Despite tropical cyclone hits moves from east to west direction, then why it hits the Gujarat and Maharashtra coastline? Okay, this is again something that we had discussed in the class itself. So here, let's suppose you consider the region of the formation of the tropical cyclone here. Now, if the ITCZ is over the Indian subcontinent, which is the case during the month of April and May, so the trade winds will be in which direction? It will be in southwest to northeast. So this is what will carry the cyclone to hit the Maharashtra and the Gujarat coastline. So it is the ITCZ when it is lying over to the north of Maharashtra and Gujarat. That is where the trade winds, the southwestern trade winds, will attract the cyclone towards that region. Okay, and so Somil, it will not exactly lead it at equator, lead to its formation at equator, slightly north or south of it. See, if I see one more question again, the repeated one, the what are the factors that contribute to urbanization in India and how can we analyze the challenges associated with the rapid urban growth? Please stop pasting that. For humanity's sake, please stop pasting that. I have replied to that question and I have asked you if you have listened or not. So please stop pasting that. Okay. Chandrasekhar, I am not getting a clarity after my several exercise of when monsoon and when winter and raining, in which months, what autumn, what is spring, and yearly how many times we get a rain. So, have you observed whichever region you are living in, whichever particular area or city you are living in, you would have observed that there is a particular time when you receive rainfall, or is it the case that today is Tuesday, it might rain, next week it might again rain? So, you have basically observed this rainfall in your place, or is it absolutely random which is happening in your place as well? What do you think? If you understand that in the northern part of the country, the southern part of the country, you have a different. When we talk about the southern part, only the portion of Tamil Nadu, Andhra coastline, there we have a different incidence of rainfall. Generally, the monsoon months, they will bring you rainfall from the month of June, July, August, September. That is when you will receive rainfall. Then you have the retreat or the withdrawal of the monsoon, which will cause rainfall only in the Coromandel coastline during the months of October, November, December, sometimes even January. That is the rainfall. However, in the month of November, December, and January, due to western disturbances, you have rainfall in the northern parts of the country as well. Okay. Higher latitude is 60-degree. Palak, about the jet stream. Okay, I'll take that question now. What is a jet stream? Sakshi, consequent and subsequent, both of them, they will follow the slope of the land, and consequent and subsequent streams. So, consequent, they are supposed to have originated first, subsequent are supposed to have originated later on, and the subsequent merges with the consequent stream, and hence both of them come into the category of sequent stream. They follow the slope of the land. Now, Palak, about the aspect of jet streams. So, when we talk about jet streams, so here these jet streams, they are very fast moving bands of air moving in higher altitude. Okay, they are very fast moving bands of air which is experienced. Now they move in bands, they move in a wavy pattern as well. Wavy pattern in the sense that you will have a variation, a kind of a horizontal variation which is experienced there, isn't it? So there is a wave which is created horizontally as well, but simultaneously there's a wave which is created vertically as well. And that is because of the meeting of the warm and the cold air parcel. So wherever you have the air temperature being different, for example, if you consider this region, on one side you have the polar air, on other side you have the tropical air which is coming from this region. So here if you observe, that creates a kind of a pressure gradient. How? So wherever you have the warm air, let's suppose you represent warm air like this. Now let's suppose you have to represent the colder air as well. So cold air will be represented somewhat like this. Now if you calculate the pressure not at the ground surface but at a particular height here, so this is the region where you will experience that since you have a larger column of air on top of it, this is a region where you will experience a kind of a high pressure. This is a region where you will experience a kind of a low pressure in existence, which is reversed. On the ground surface here, you will have high pressure. On the ground surface here, you will have low pressure. But it is reversed in that case. So that means winds will be moving very strongly from the high pressure to the low pressure, that is from the warmer air region to the colder air region. Now if you imagine in this area, so here let's suppose in this region you have the warmer air, and in this region you have the colder air. So winds in the upper atmosphere will move very strongly from the region of the warm to the cold air. But at an altitude, because the wind speed is very high, the Coriolis bending will also be very high. So there you will observe a kind of a bending, a rightward bending. And that is what creates the jet stream. Okay. And okay, do you guys need a break for today's class? Let's not have a break, and let's end the session early if possible. This is a doubt clearing session. Why do we need a break for this? Yes, Rana, I will do that. You have sent it today itself, I gather, the reminder that you have sent. Okay, Vivek, go ahead. Are polar jets more stronger? Yes, they are much more stronger. Then a certain set of questions by Varun Raj. So, does an earthquake occur in the mantle below 100 kilometers? I personally feel the stress cannot develop in such soft mediums. So even beyond, so you have the Benioff Vadati zone. So that is the zone of convergence where the land continues to subduct furthermore. So it continues up till a depth of close to around 400 to 700 kilometers. So it is across that entire zone of convergence and subduction where the earthquake can originate. Okay. And causes and consequences of desertification. So desertification is created either by the erosion of the soil, okay, or in simple terms, desertification is created either because of the expansion of the existing desert area, where the existing desert area simply opens up and spreads over, depositing the sand in the otherwise fertile areas, making them infertile as well. So that is one of the ways of having desertification. Other method is where the soil gets degraded. Soil gets degraded, their productivity is hampered, so nothing grows in that region. That causes desertification. So what can be the factors to control it? So you have to control the expansion of the existing desert. That is where you build a green wall initiative of Africa that we have talked about, that immediately to the south of Sahara desert there's a construction of a green cover of sorts where trees are being planted so that the sand is not eroded into the otherwise fertile or vegetation areas. So that is one of the techniques. The other is to prevent soil erosion and to prevent soil degradation. So all the methods that we have studied to prevent soil erosion and degradation, that will also fit into the category of preventing desertification. Chandrasekhar, by adding gypsum to land or desert area, does it help to grow plant? Is it possible? Yes, it increases or enhances the texture of the soil. How faults are created? Faults are created basically because of the compression or expansion. So when you consider any kind of rock type, any rock type that you consider, now there, when you consider a rock in general, the rock will also have its own compressional and the elasticity associated with that. So it cannot think of, or it cannot withstand any amount of compression or expansion beyond it. For example, take this pen. Now, if I continue to compress it, will it bend? No, it is a plastic pen, so it will break from between. Similarly, if I continue to pull it away, do you think it will stretch itself like rubber? No, it will again break. So, any of the compressional or tensional forces, when it overcomes the rock's inner structural strength, that is when the breakage or the crack happens. Okay. What are Furious 50s and Shrieking 60s? These are basically the name that given to westerlies in the southern hemisphere. That is where the westerlies are particularly stronger. So that is the name given to them. Right? Why are they stronger? Because they move over the water body where the frictional force is less. That is why they are always accompanied by a kind of a howling sound when you have very strong wind, hence the name associated. How does soil quality impact agriculture in the country? It influences the productivity, and productivity, if it is influenced, the amount of crops, then also the amount of fertilizer that you have to give in, then the amount of water that you have to put in, all that is dependent on that itself, the type of fertilizer that you have to put in. Okay. Then a few other questions which are there. uh, Varun Raj had another. So, Varun Raj, you had around 14 of the questions which you had put. Okay. So, does the Mercalli scale want to measure ground response characteristic due to energy released or the final outcome of the quake? Final outcome of the quake. If the final outcome is a measurement aim, then construction standards also come into measurement. So oftentimes after the earthquake has happened, what is the overall impact which is observed? That is the basis on which Mercalli scale has its division. How to say that something is an intrusive landform by visual inspection, you cannot say, because many of the times the lava domes or the volcanic rocks also give you the same appearance. Do glacial deposits contain humus? The fresh glacial deposits don't, but sometimes they do, because many of the times in the continental glaciers you have the remains of the various species which are perfectly preserved. So when you have the deposits carried out, that is when they get converted into organic matter. So sometimes they do have. For example, northwestern Europe. What conditions result in yardangs but not mushrooms? The size of the rock. If the size of the rock is very large, then mushroom will be created. Okay, global warming potential, etc., is portion of environment, Varun Raj. And can jet stream have a positive impact also by transferring cloud? Absolutely, yes. Then difference between valley inversion and surface inversion. Surface inversion is where the surface cools down, creating the condition of a negative lapse rate by creating cold air column closer to the surface. When we talk about the valley inversion, that is where the slope of the land is such. So in the case of the valley inversion, what you have is the fact that there is the colder air which starts to sink, and that colder air will replace the warmer air from the bottom, and it is the topography of the land here which has induced this kind of inversion. Okay. Then can jets okay how diurnal tides occur? That is, diurnal tides occur, that is once a day when you have a high tide or low tide. That is particularly influenced by the presence of the land mass or the continents. If earth had been a sphere with only oceans, every place would have at the same time the occurrence of two high tides and two low tides, but that is not the case, because you have land masses in between. So many of the areas, they don't get that transfer of water with the movement of the moon. So that is why certain areas, they are blocked, and certain water bodies, they don't get that the case of semi-diurnal tides, they have the tidal action only once. Okay. Why is Ooty at 2400 kilometer above sea? Ooty is not at 2400, okay, 2400 meter maybe. If Western Ghats is just an escarpment and slightly pushed up, so there you have many of the hills and the mountain ranges as well. All of these are volcanic landforms which have been created long time back. Now, volcanic landforms can have great heights. Take the case of Mount Aconcagua in the region of South America. It has a height of 6,000 meters. So, does not mean volcanic landforms will always have a low height. Okay. Um, Kaveri River should be on the leeward side of the Western Ghats. How is it receiving rain from southwest monsoon in the upper tracts? Because of the various different gaps which are present in the Western Ghats. You have the Pal Ghat, Shenkota Gap, all the Anamalai Gap, all these gaps, they allow the movement and the passage of the winds through the Western Ghats, which brings rainfall in the region of southern Karnataka as well. Okay, and why deciduous forests occur behind the Western Ghats and later thorny forest? Because the amount of moisture is still prevalent immediately across the hill areas. You have rainfall which percolates, so moisture is present even in the hilly areas. Further higher or further far away that you go, moisture content further keeps on reducing, hence you have thorny forests. Okay. Laterite soil is where you have the action of leaching, and saline soil is where you have the capillary action. So, leaching is when all the nutrients are drained down by water. Capillary action is where through the pores, all that water along with the nutrients is something which rises up to the surface. That is why both are different. Okay, right? Okay, first of all, please stop drawing smileys in the class. Okay, this is not a private chat group that you are operating in. So please stop drawing smileys. If you have pasted a question at 7:04 and you have started drawing smileys at 7:04 and 7:05, please have some amount of decorum. Um, do I need to study 9th and 10th NCRT as well? No, 11th and 12th NCRT will be more than sufficient, my dear friend. Okay, and okay, Ashay, sir, please reply. It's a very big question. Sir, please reply. It's very important. Okay, what is the important? Okay, should we need to study whole NCRTs or selective? Read the whole NCRTs. So once you have covered this classes, I don't think NCRT should be uh, so Ashay, I'm replying to your question itself. So if you have covered the portion of the classes, the NCRT shouldn't be tough task at all. So you will be able to finish the entirety of the NCRTs within 10 days if you are revising it quickly. So go through it. Think about it as a kind of a check process, content check, that anything new that I come across, I'll underline it immediately. I'll try to understand it immediately. Otherwise, all the other portions I've already studied. There are certain errors in the NCRT also. So if you carry out your revision immediately, you will be able to point that out as well as a difference. Okay. Can we use only ethanol instead of petroleum? Not exactly, because the various different internal combustion engines that we have, they operate on the calorific value of petroleum and diesel, not in the case of ethanol. So you need to develop newer engines with the same amount of efficiency, then you can. Okay. And factors influencing the Indian climate of Indian subcontinent and the monsoon phenomena. Yes, Muskan, you can do that. Factors influencing. Okay, before that, I'll take another major question. Geography book, which is the best, means GC Leong or Majid Hussain? None of them. If you are not studying it for optional, none of them. Just read the NCRTs, read it 10 times. Trust me, the second time that you will read it, you will extract something different than you have what you have read in the first time. The third time that you will read, you will extract something different. That is the beauty of NCRT. You might not realize the meaning of these words right now, but after 6 months, get back to me after you have carried out three processes of revision of the NCRT. You will find yourself to be much more confident as an individual. Don't follow simply the herd mentality. Everybody is only thinking about GC Long and Majid Hussain, so I'll also buy that. GC Long has never been written for UPSC perspective. I hope you are aware that GC Leong is only for the physical part. Majid Hussain is only for the Indian geography part, right? NCRTs cover both of them. So if you read both of them, still you will be required to read the NCRTs. So think about it. Better to keep one book which covers both of them and read it 10 times as compared to a book, 10 different books that you will be able to read only once. Okay? Factors of influencing climate. I have listed it down already. It is there in the PPT as well. I don't know why these questions are coming. It is listed, given in a list in the PPT. So you have the factor of location, that is the latitudinal location. Then you have Himalayas. Then you have heating surrounding of water body, land and water distribution. Take a look at the PPT of 12th module. You will get that entire list that you are seeking for, Vivek. Okay. Here I am writing for the factors influencing the climate of India, but that is all. Okay, these are the ones which will influence the climate of India. Factors influencing the monsoon, you'll find it in the list itself. You have the heating of land and water, differential rate of heating, the shifting of the ITCZ, the presence of the subtropical westerly jet stream, heating of the Tibetan highlands, and the generation of the tropical easterly jet. Then after that, you also have the factor of mascarene high pressure. Then you have the factor of El Nino Indian Ocean dipole phenomena. All of that will influence the monsoon. Okay. Love and Rayleigh wave, the difference is very minute in terms of only the speed and also the variation, right? In one of them you have a horizontal variation, in another one you have a vertical kind of an undulation or variation in the case of how the land is behaving or how the wave is generated. And also the other difference that you will end up finding is the fact that in the case of when we talk about love wave and Rayleigh wave, love wave is comparatively faster. Okay. Factors for Bay of Bengal having more cyclonic uh, cyclones, and the Manas will end the class soon. As soon as we see that the doubts are getting repeated, we'll end the session as soon as possible. So here, Ashay, how to make my answer unique from others in the exam? Repeat the answers or repeat the process of answer writing as much as possible. Ideally, you should try to have an attempt of close to around 1,000 answers before you go for the exam hall. It will always improve. Okay. And Rana, I'm trying to find your mail which you had sent. And before that, I had a question of Laksh that I was taking. That could you please mention must factor? So basically, Laksh, think about it. When you talk about the factors, the Walker circulation, the negative phase of IOD, the neutral phase of IOD, the La Nina conditions, all of them will favor the creation of low pressure where in the region of the eastern, or in the region of Bay of Bengal, right? Then you have the stratification of water which is observed in the region of Bay of Bengal. All these factors induce greater cyclonic movement. Also, because of the trade winds, that is, the trade winds move in which direction? Like this, right? So when you have the land or the peninsular land like this, so here you will have greater downwelling, means increased temperature. Okay, right. And Rana, I saw the questions. Okay. So, are live lectures and current affairs more than enough for prelims or mains? Yes. Just cover them with significant detail. You should have the answer writing practice as well. What if the outer core of the earth would have been solid? It would affect the life or effect on earth and life on earth. First of all, this question would never be asked in the examination. So you yourself have written that only if it is to be asked in prelims or mains, it would never be asked in the examination. But consider the probability that the outer core would have been completely solid. Then the aspect of the magnetism would also have been impacted, and also the heat provided from interior is very important for the movement of the land masses and creation of the newer land masses, so that would also have been hindered. Okay. Intensity of an earthquake is the measure of the damage caused by the earthquake. That is the intensity. Magnitude is the measure of the energy which is released. Now, damage caused can vary dependent upon at what depth earthquake has occurred, what kind of material the construction or on which the construction has happened. But energy released will be same, whether at the depth of 100 kilometer, 200 kilometer, 300 kilometer, or 10 kilometer. That energy might dissipate after reaching the surface or by the time it reaches the surface. So when you measure the energy, the amplitude of energy, it is magnitude. When you measure the damage causing potential, it is referred to as the uh, intensity. And angle of P and S wave calculated from focus or epicenter from focus. Okay. And where is focus and epicenter of earthquake caused by violent volcanic? It depends. It sometimes happens right underneath the portion of the volcanic cone itself, but sometimes it happens in the vicinity of that volcanic cone. As the pressure is exerted on the volcanic cone, there is some movement which happens in the nearby areas, the weaker crack portions. So there can also be the focus and epicenter in that case. As taught in lecture 6 of geography, positions of mantle plumes are fixed. But further, Sarada added that it's not really fixed, but it's fixed with respect to the human's existence. Yes, that is true. So there is a possibility. See, if you consider it, the mantle plumes, if you consider for the past, let's say 100 million years, they have been fixated in a place. But then that is not to say that the planet's own life is for 4.5 billion years. The planet that we know of, that is in existence for almost 3.5 billion years. So there the mantle plumes have changed their position. But as compared to the last 100 years, they are consistent. Okay. So if a question is asked in prelim stating that do mantle plumes change their position, then you should say that no, they are fixed. In the mains answer, however, you can distinguish. Insolation and difference between insolation and heating. So insolation is the amount of solar energy which is received. Heating is the temperature factor which is attained. So it is not always the case that insolation will lead to heating, right? Insolation sometimes, for example, in high altitude, you can have the condition where the insolation is very high, but heating is not there, right? Because the air or the ground at the higher elevation will lose heat very, very quickly. So that is where it varies. Okay. Why slant rays cover more distance than the vertical rays? It is a phenomena where, think about it, let's suppose you consider this as the ground surface. We will consider the portion of atmosphere as well. So here, if you have a ray which is reaching here, and if you have a ray which is reaching like this, so obviously the distance of this will be much larger, because think about it, this forms your right angle triangle. I'm sure that much amount of basic maths would be understood. So that slant will form a hypotenuse, right? This will form your perpendicular, this will form your base, right? So hypotenuse is always the longest side. Hence, it is going to cover the largest distance. Okay. How caves are formed underneath the surface? They are formed as a result of the erosional or the weathering or the degradation activity carried out, where you have the rocks which are composed of, let's suppose, calcium, magnesium carbonate, and sulfate. In those areas, as the water starts percolating through, it will start consuming those rocks and dissolving those materials. That is why the caves get created. Both GS plus optional. Difference between trenches and canyons. Trenches will be created whenever you have the convergence happening in between, let's suppose, the oceanic and the continental, or oceanic. So it will be a very long one which is parallel to the plate boundary, the trenches. The canyons which are created, the submarine canyons that are created, they are created due to erosion. So one is created due to plate subduction, another is created, canyons are created due to erosion by the turbidity current. Which study material like ARM, your notes, and class 11, 12 NCRT can I prepare for optional to know? This will cover only around 60% of your optional. For optional, you will need to cover some portions of geomorphology in, for example, isostasy, then cycles of denudation, the uh, Davis, Penck, King, all their theories we have not talked about. So that is something that you need to study and cover separately. You need to cover some portions in climatology as well, of the various different theories associated. Then, for example, the Bergeron theory in terms of cloud formation. Even though the cloud formation that I've talked about, that is the one which is asked even in optional, but still, for climatic classification, you need to cover Trivarta, Thornwhite. So you need to cover. So look at the portion of the notification, you get an idea. And Rana, I just now took the 8 questions that you had sent to me. Did you hear all those 8 answers, Rana? If not, it is a massive exercise in waste. Nonetheless, the recording of the session will be available. You can take a look at all the 8 questions that I replied. Okay. And Yuvraj, may you explain why there is a delay in northeast monsoon this year and its link with the Enzo cycle? So, first of all, Yuvraj, northeast monsoon gets initiated after 17th of September, and even post that, generally in the month of December onwards, that is when the northeast monsoon gets stronger, right? As of now, you will have the retreat or the withdrawal of the monsoon. Now it is suspected that the northeast monsoon will develop later on, because of substantial amount of cooling which has happened, and the lack of rainfall which will be induced by El Nino conditions. So that lack of rainfall will alter the temperature in the northern part. Now northeast monsoons are induced, why? If you recall our discussion, we had discussed that it is the Potwar Plateau in the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent, in the region of Pakistan. That is where a substantial high pressure develops during the later part of October and November. It is from that Potwar Plateau, if you recall, that winds will originate, and the winds, they start turning rightwards, right? And that is what encompasses the northeast monsoon rather. Having said that, due to Enzo conditions, when you have drier conditions, the heat wave conditions which will be much more pervasive even during the month of October onwards. So that is where this substantial high pressure development that will be hampered, because simultaneously in the northern Indian plains, still you will have a warming effect or heating effect due to Enzo. Now, that means the winds will be having a short movement. So, this wind movement, that will be altered. That is why its movement will be significantly fluctuating, its movement will be interrupted, and it is said to originate much later on in the month of late November and December. However, still, despite the predictions that you are studying, Yuvraj, just wait for it. There are certain predictions which have been made, which talks about that because you have drier conditions in the northern part, which will be in play very soon. So there you might have very cold conditions in the month of November. So that might fuel the northeast monsoon. So let's wait for it. Okay. And overview of air bending in northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Okay, Sakshi, so air bends in the rightward direction in the northern hemisphere, it bends in the leftward direction in the southern hemisphere. So always think about it when you have the planet. So if this is the region of equator, so it bends in the rightward direction in the northern hemisphere, it bends in the leftward direction in the southern hemisphere, or rather the inverse of it. So here, all types of rocks look same. Krishna, when will we do mapping? We have done mapping already today morning, Krishna. We had a 3 hour session where we discussed about mapping as well. We discussed about the population geography as well. We discussed about transportation as well. All the types of rocks look same, indigenous, metamorphic, etc. How can we differentiate them for learning? So, indigenous, the primary set of rocks which have been created when you have volcanic eruption and cooling down of lava, that is where you have the igneous, not the indigenous, but igneous rocks. Metamorphic, sedimentary or igneous rocks, any of them, when they have gone through substantial amount of compression or modification under immense pressure, under high temperature, that is when you have the creation of the metamorphic rocks. Okay. Now, okay, another set of question. Is Malwa part of Deccan Plateau? No. Major landforms created by fluvial processes. So the erosional and depositional landforms which have been created, we have discussed them already earlier. If you recall, in the list you will find them and you will get a clue there. Okay. Now, then other set of questions. Characteristics of tropical and temperate cyclone, again in module 9 in the second last slide you will get the entire details of it. But there is separate doubt which I had sent. What is that separate doubt? Can you paste it in the session? Okay, right. Due to rotation of the earth, the liquid outer core also moves, resulting in creation of a magnetic field. Okay, there will always be a magnetic field perpendicular to the electric field, and vice versa is also true. If there's a presence of a magnetic field and there's a presence of a rotating conductor, then there will be generation of electricity. On the same principle, thermal power plant works and generates electricity. Okay. So here, think about it, Rana. What we are talking about is that when the outer core rotates, so that is where it is not simply the rotation which can generate magnetic effect. Now it is the liquid outer core that means at very high temperature you have the presence of various different ions which are created. So those ions, when they move, it creates the impact of electricity movement. That is why perpendicular to it you have the magnetic field which is generated. So if you can think about it, so imagine the ionic movement around the core will be in this area. So it will be like charge is moving in a kind of a solenoid. So that is where perpendicular to it, you will have magnetic field which is generated. Is that understood? Sea wave movement look like moving ahead, but tides mean only up and down. Tides are different from the sea wave. Rana, is that understood? The portion of it? Now, sea wave movement, so wave is different than tides. Tide is a vertical undulation, vertical rise and fall, which is induced by gravitation. Wave is a kind of an oscillatory movement because of wind action. So as the wind tries to pull the water, it will try to pull it. To some extent it will, but again it will drop. To some extent again it will, again it will drop. So that is how you have a kind of a oscillatory circular motion in the case of the wave. Then why? The problem is we are so convinced that we are correct. Okay, I'll go through, I read your entire question. Okay, so your question is, why is there no electricity inside the earth? Let's apply the same concept with respect to earth's magnetic field. There is a magnetic field due to rotation of outer core. Parallelly there is a solid inner core which majorly consists of nickel and iron, which are great conductors of electricity. That is, according to me, there is an ideal situation with respect to creation of electricity inside the earth. Here outer core is behave. That is where you are mistaking, my dear friend. That is what I have been trying to convey. Okay, let me try once again. Think about, forget, clear your mind of all the prejudices that you have. As per the Faraday's law, what is it that you have concluded? Magnetic field will be perpendicular to the movement of electricity. You have concluded that. Now, when we consider planet Earth, see, I am also aware of the Faraday's law, and it is based on that principle itself that the magnetic field and the creation of geomagnetism can be explained. Right? So think about it. It is not as if it is a new insight which has been brought about in the portion of geomorphology. The very principle of geomagnetism is driven from the basics of Faraday's law itself. So it is because we cannot talk about Faraday's law because majority of the students are from arts background. That is why we have taken that approach. But if you have raised this question, listen to this very carefully now. So here, let's suppose you have the outer core. Now, let's suppose you have the portion of molten outer core, inner core. Now, if both of them would have been solid and the planet would have rotated, would it have generated a geomagnetism or a magnetic field? What do you think? If both of them would have been solid, would it have generated a magnetic field? No, right? Everybody is convinced that if we simply have a ball of iron, if we rotate it, it doesn't become magnetic as a result of it. So we are convinced in that. Now think about it. This is a liquid outer core. Liquid. Liquid by virtue of temperature. So temperature is very high. Now, if this rotates along with the planet, even though it will not always have the same velocity, but if it is rotating along with the planet, so can we say molten materials at very high temperature, they are undergoing rotation. So that means you will have creation of certain ions. Certain atoms will attack the other atoms. They will pick up the electrons from the other atoms. They will pick up the electrons from other atoms as well. So you will have the presence of ions in this region. Can we have this? Till now, everything is perfect. Is that understood? Till now, we just have the presence of ions. Perfect. Now, when you have this motion of the ions, they start behaving like a solenoid. What is a solenoid? Solenoid or toroid that you would have studied, where the electricity passes through this particular apparatus of sorts. Now, as the electricity or the charge moves in a kind of a spiral helical structure, it is the charge which moves in a spiral helical structure. So this will induce, as per Faraday's law, a kind of a magnetic field which is perpendicular to it. Till now, is everything okay? Any point of contradiction till now? Everything okay? So if it generates a magnetic field as a consequence of it, which is perpendicular to it, what will be the magnetic field? It will be somewhere here, isn't it? Now, can we say that because there is a magnetic field, there will be creation of another electric field as well, and another electric movement which will be passing only through the center? Will that be a correct deduction to make? Because this magnetic field is already a resultant as per the principles of the Faraday's law. Is that understood now? Or is there any doubt which still prevails? Feel free to ask. Okay, I give you some time. Think about it, digest it, and then ask. And why river cuts incised meander? Why don't it cut just a gorge? Puja, because the incised meander that you see, there the river is already in the form of a meander. So when you talk about the incised meander, so in those regions, the river already exhibits a kind of a meandering force, right? It is just that the land around it has uplifted itself. That is why it appears as an incised meander. It is not as if the river is cutting the land in that meandering shape. It is the land which has uplifted later on. Okay. Sejal, concept of saturation. So here, basically, when we talk about the concept of saturation, any object, be it air, be it water, when it doesn't have the capacity to accommodate any new substance, any new material within it, that is referred to as being saturated. So, air, for example, when we talk about humidity, when air has got all the amount of moisture that it can hold, it cannot accommodate any more moisture within it. We call the air to be saturated. Okay, Rana, it is absolutely perfect. I I want the candidates to be thinking beyond the limit. Oftentimes it comes with its own price, but that is something that I would absolutely encourage. I would encourage you to continue thinking in this same aspect. Any other questions that we have, guys? Explain the concept of sustainable development and its relevance in the context of resource management. That is a portion that you will study if you have read the book of Ram Ahuja or the society classes that you will attend. You will get through that. Okay. And Kumari, how isotherms bend towards pole in winters and towards equator in summer? It is not in general that you will observe the bend. When they cross the water bodies, that is when you will observe the bend, right? So generally you will observe that if you have the land area, let's suppose you have the land area. Now if you have, and this is the polar region, so if you have the winter season, so the isotherm here, if I ask you before that, and Kumari, I want you to reply, others can also reply. So here, the temperature that you observe in this particular portion, the temperature that you observe at A, that temperature, let's assume, is minus 12 degrees Celsius. Now, that temperature will be observed at point 1, point 2, or point 3. What do you think? Where do you think you will experience the similar temperature? This is the water, this is the land. Ramya, Manas correct, Shakshi and Vivek incorrect. I'm talking about the winter season, guys. So it will be experienced at the region of 1, right? Because During winter, at the same latitude, water is warmer, land is colder. Right? Water is warmer. So that means here, water is warmer in comparison. So where will the water be colder? Much closer to the poles. So that is why the isotherm which you will draw will have a bend like this. So during winter, it will bend towards the region of equator, bend towards the region of the poles. But during summer, land is much hotter than water. So if let's suppose during summer conditions, if let's suppose here I have the land, or I take the same case, if I consider A, let's suppose A in summer condition has a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius. I'm just assuming here. Okay. Now, that 25 degrees Celsius, now land is much hotter than the water at the same latitude. So, in order to get hotter water or equally higher temperature water, you need to go towards the equator or towards the poles. So, this 25 degrees Celsius at A, that will be observed at 1, 2, or 3. What do you think? 3, isn't it? So, it will bend towards the region of equator during the summer season. I hope you get the answer now. Okay. Now, it is said, Sakshi, what mistakes you done while preparation? So there were a few mistakes out there, including in the interview panel as well. But generally, if I have to pinpoint two or three major mistakes, so one of them would be to take the exams very lightly, to overestimate oneself. That is one of the biggest mistakes. Second, not enough practice. So these two mistakes will be one of my suggestions to you. Don't underestimate the examination and overestimate yourself. Never do that. And secondly, practice is the solution to all the problems that you face. And Sejal, it is said that in equator there is no Coriolis force. Then why winds turn south? Why winds turn south in southern hemisphere and north in northern hemisphere? Which winds are we talking about which will turn south in the southern hemisphere and north in the northern hemisphere? And Laksh, revision, that's it. What should be our target, that how long it should take to do revision? First phase of revision should be completed within 7 to 10 days, my dear friends, whichever subject you are reading. If you don't carry out the first phase of revision, that will always come to bite you later on. And that means, think about it, that you have initiated the preparation for 2024. Just as an assumption, you have initiated the preparation of 2024, let's suppose in the month of April. You are attending classes, right? Now you start your revision by the month of October. Everything that you have studied earlier, you have forgotten. So you will require another 3 to 4 months to develop those concepts again, revisit those concepts again. Nothing is more dangerous in UPSC than little information or ill baked concepts. That is very dangerous. And that comes when you don't revise. When you think that, okay, tropical cyclone, I know some part, and the rest of it, you simply fill it up by your imagination. So that is where you get the false sense of confidence. That is where you will continue to commit negative errors as well. And so that is why first revision complete within 7 to 10 days. Think about it. The ones that you see as a topper, they also initiate the preparation for 2024 in the month of April, May itself. But by the time of October, November, they would have already had a couple of revisions of the entire GS portion. They would have initiated the portion of optional from the month of September or August itself. Optional would be completed by December. From the month of January, again, every month, it is made a point that you revise all the major subject at least once every month from January onwards. So that is when, by the time that you reach the prelims phase, you are so very confident because your eye is already towards the mains examination. Your preparation is for the mains examination. Prelims is just a hurdle for you. But there are candidates who will prepare only for prelims. God knows what we will do after we succeed in prelims. That is enough for me. So then success is never going to be attained. Okay. Uh, is seafloor spreading? Yes, my dear friend, it is spreading. And you have creation of a newer crust at the region of the mid-oceanic ridges. And Sakshi, too. And if I go outside, I'm easy to see a cloud in the sky, but how to trace out its cumulonimbus cloud or stratus? If it is a stretched upon cloud which is not very thick, somewhat brightish in appearance, it is a stratus cloud. It can cause some amount of drizzle. If it is a stretched out cloud with thick black underpinnings in certain areas, it is nimbostratus. It can cause long rainfall. But if it is very dark clouds above you, which blocks the sunlight completely, creates dark condition, cumulonimbus. Okay. Prelims PYQs, Kumari, in the case of geography and history, the sad part is that some portion of facts are also included. I had broken down the portion of prelims word by word and in various simple ways to help you understand that there will be 20 to 25 factual questions, around 20, 15 to 20 factual questions, which even UPSC doesn't expect you to solve. Sadly, those 15 to 20 factual questions come from the portion of history, come from the portion of geography, come from the portion of science and tech, environment, ecology. So that is why while we are preparing for the subjects, we always lack confidence. Think about it that if 15 questions from geography will come in prelims, 4 of them will be factual. I will not attempt them. Right? Rest of the 11 ones, I have to get minimum 10 of them correct. That in itself will get you through. Don't worry about that. Okay. Why region of high pressure and low pressure don't experience wind movement? They will experience wind movement in the sense, if you are asking that, see, because the high pressure is the origin, right? The origin of the wind. So if you are standing, if this is the high pressure, so this is the origin of the wind. So if an individual, poor fellow, is standing here that I will face wind, they don't encounter that wind. Okay, so it will continuously move. Similarly, in the case of the low pressure, here it is not as if the wind will come and cross here. No, that is not how the wind will operate. Wind will come, will rise here. So if you are an individual standing here, you will experience the wind. If you are an individual standing here, you will experience the wind. But if you are an individual standing here, no wind movement at all. Okay. Right. How frequent should we revise as every single subject? So Mohammed, do one thing in that process. As you have finished one subject, then simultaneously, while you are reading the other subject, for example, right now, if I'm not mistaken, in the evenings you are having polity in place of geography. So do one thing, that add on 1 hour of your study time every day in order to revise geography as well, the portion that you have studied, the whichever module that you want to follow from initial to the end. So that is how, if after some point of time, you will get very confident. And that is why you will find that there's always a paucity of time for the civil services aspirants. The civil services aspirant who will tell you that I have a lot of time, I don't know what to do in the time. Somewhere the preparation focus is lacking. Okay. Right. And so I hope all the questions have been answered. Compare the characteristics of Western and Eastern Ghats in India. Western Ghats are much more continuous, Eastern Ghats are much more eroded and weathered. Western Ghats are an escarpment. The Eastern Ghats, they are emergent coastline which are indicated. The Eastern Ghats, you will observe less amount of vegetation, deciduous vegetation. Western Ghats, continuous vegetation. Lot of rivers originate from the Western Ghats. Okay. Raja, what is your question, my dear friend, which you had sent through the mail, which I have not taken till now? Please ask your question, Raja. SK, no, this is the last, after the last class. This is only the doubt clearing session. in equator there is no Coriolis force, then the winds turn right in northern. No, they don't turn right or left at the region of equator, Sejal. They do it prior to reaching the equatorial region itself. And the sometimes you might get confused by the depiction of the trade winds that we see like this. It is not exactly like this. It is somewhat in a way like this. So that is why we depict it like that. So it is not something which happens there. Alps and Ural Mountains, they have been created as different cratons. They have collided, creating the convergence and the formation of the folds. No, there have been plate boundaries, the passive plate boundaries. The today's plate boundary that you see, they have not created Alps, Ural Mountains, Caucasus Mountains. They were created much earlier, during the time of the Rodinia itself, when you consider. Right? We have discussed about the Wilson cycle, that Pangea was just another large supercontinent. Before that, also, you had two major supercontinents which broke up into various continents. They all came together, again got divided, again came together. The third time that they came together, that is what we refer to as Pangea. So that Pangea broke up and is again coming together. So that is the process. So these have been created in the previous collisions. Okay. Okay, Raja, your question is okay. See, this question I have gone through. That is how the melting of Arctic enhances Enzo, which in turn affects the Indian monsoon. So, Raja, it is the other way around, my dear friend. It is the Enzo circulation which can enhance the melting of the Arctic. Now, sometimes the other cases have also been found, but there is not a striking coincidence to form a theory about it that melting of Arctic has led to the Enzo condition. What is observed is generally observed in the region of the Arctic around the Barents and the Kara Sea region. The Barents Sea and the Kara Sea region, extending even to the areas of Chukchi Sea and the Beaufort Sea. So, in that entire area, now, what happens is when you have Enzo circulation, so that or the Enzo cycles, now the heating phase of the Pacific, that is the El Nino. Now, that induces a kind of a Rossby wave like characteristic. Rossby wave is simply where you have multiple undulations horizontally and vertically as well, which carries that warmth to the higher latitude. And that is how eventually that warmth is then pushed through into the lower levels by the jet stream, and that induces further accelerated rate of melting. That is why sometimes during El Nino you have accelerated rate of melting which is experienced. When you talk about PDO, that is specific decadal oscillation, it is something which is very similar to Enzo conditions, but it happens over a very long time interval for 20, 30 years almost, where you have the entire Western Pacific which is warmed up, entire Eastern Pacific which is warmed up, and so on. So when you have a condition of certain factor of PDO, one of the conditions of Enzo will get exaggerated or will be countered as a result of it. Okay, is that understood? um, as of now, Chandrasekhar, study GS, get a good grip over general studies. Optional will come later on. Yes, Khushbu. Yes, Vaninder, summer and winter solstice simultaneously in the northern and the southern hemisphere respectively. Yes, that is correct. Okay, so where can we see the oldest and the youngest igneous rocks? The youngest you can see in the region of the Hawaiian mountains, where eruption has been happening very lately as well. And the oldest, one of the oldest, you can find in the region of Western Australia, where few of the rocks indicate the presence of or their formation close to around 3.2 billion years back. Okay. So immediate leeward side of Western Ghat received decent amount of rainfall because it is not a mountain like this. It is a kind of an escarpment. The Western Ghat, had it been like this, then the immediate leeward side won't have received rainfall. But it is an escarpment of sorts. That is why here it is not immediate adiabatic compression which will happen. Here also some rainfall will be received. Okay. Uh, Sakshi, I have not included it into the PPT, so won't ask that. Okay. Felsic and mafic. Felsic is the one which is rich in silica content. Rich in silica content means it doesn't flow very easily, will have lesser density, lighter in appearance as well. Whereas when you talk about mafic, mafic is the one which is going to be rich in iron, magnesium. It will be darker in appearance, very dense. It will flow like liquid water. Okay. When to approach optional for 2024? As early as possible. So start from now itself, so that you have some good grasp about the optional by the month of December. You have completed substantial chunk. Why the cold front moves faster than the warm front? Isn't the warm front should move faster than the cold front? No, because when you talk about the cold front, it is the advancement of the cold air happening on the ground surface. Now remember our discussion when we talked about the relative strength of the thermal and the dynamic high pressure and low pressure. Now across the frontal formation, you will observe that the cold air is a thermal high pressure. That is why it drives very substantially at a quicker pace as well. Early mid next year, Ushashri. Viscosity refers to ease of flow, right? Viscosity is very high, it is very viscous, means unable to flow easily. Think about it, honey and water. If you drain both of them at the same time, both of them will have a different flow, isn't it? Today morning, mapping and some portions of population and transportation geography happen. So I think now we can end it. Do fronts occur only in the temperate cyclone? Not always. Even in tropical cyclone, you will have the moist air, the warm air meeting. So some amount can happen, but mostly in temperate cyclone. Okay. Crack on dry land river area does have good capacity water holding compared to the normal land ones. Even the normal land ones will have a good capacity to hold water. How will air sink in the eye of the tropical cyclone? So here again, I want you to think about Vishnu, the as the example that we had given, where we had talked about that if you try to rotate water in the bucket in the sides, what will happen? From the central point, it will appear to sink. That is the same aspect here. Thermal and the other high pressure. So thermal high pressure, because of very cold conditions, sink happens. But the dynamic pressure is created when, let's suppose, in the upper atmosphere, you have winds which are confronting each other. They have no other place to go. So where will the winds be directed to? The winds will be pushed down. Now, not only will they be pushed down, they will hit the surface themselves. So that is what they will create, a kind of a high pressure on the ground. That is the dynamic high pressure. A cliff and a fjord. Fjord is created by a erosion of sort, a scratching erosion of sorts by the glacial movement. Cliffs are created generally across the sea face by the continuous process of chemical erosion and eventual subsidence as well. But chemical weathering and erosion is predominant in the formation of cliff. And fjord is where you have the physical erosion which is responsible. Answer writing skills, when you talk about, then for geography, very simple: indicate images or diagrams, write the answer which is asked in the question. Don't write what you know about. Think about what you want, what is asked in the question. Even if I am not able to fill 250 words, fair enough. Whatever is asked, I will write only that. Okay. Flowchart, diagrams, every answer should have a minimum of one diagram, right? Introduction should address the demand of the question directly. Do this basic, sufficient. Okay. Right. And forest, Chandrasekhar. Okay. So that is where we'll end the session here today, guys. I understand many of you have not completed the portion of revision. So please carry out your revision. Whenever any doubt does emerge or erupt, don't worry. You can always contact us. You can contact me, write a mail. We'll get back to you. And please ensure that the revision is carried out. Carry out the journey. Please understand this is a preparation for your destiny. So it is you who has to be as serious as they can. Okay. So that is where we'll end the session. We'll bid goodbye to each other till we meet again. Do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you and have a good night. Vaninder, the next batch will be the weekend batch, which will be initiated in the later part of September. You can write to at IS Life. Chandrasekhar, the mail ID is at Byju's. Okay.